The story you're about to hear takes place in a deep, sad, buried part of my heart. I just, heard this story from a squirrel that traveled with his family from that city to my city. Do you think you came here for a good time? Do you think you wanted to, just relax on your couch driving and hear nice stories? Well, you are wrong. This time you are wrong. The story you're about to hear will make you regret to have pressed play on this video. But I am not sorry because life sometimes is sad. It's not fair. Sometimes it's too late. Sometimes you just gotta click play on the sad story and see where it takes you. So without further ado, rub the wrong way. September ends. It had been a fidgety month for all involved. The maples had become barren faster than ever. The oaks, as usual, were trying their hardest to be the last one with some leaves left, stubborn old oaks. In front of this bunch, on the other side of the street, they had planted a row of cherry trees. 3 years waiting to see what they would produce, and all they could muster were a few flamboyant pink flowers and perky little balls before retreating in the span of a few months. That's how they got their nickname, Pinky Ain't Promising, from the one witty guy at the end. But as life would have it, almost everyone that was making fun of them just a few weeks back were now the ones preparing to retreat for the colder months. The preparation went like the year before and the ones before that. The leaves being swept up by those busy beings with bright green jackets, the nuts being gathered and stored by every rodent in the park. Every tree wrote down the resolution for the next spring. The first tree down the row, a sweetheart of a maple, resolved to make himself a better hiding space for city rats who were being hunted down. Jonathan the Plague, because he was the only one who had a plague, and because he was morose, made the resolution of spitting pollen on whoever seemed to be slightly allergic, or anyone who dared sit on his huge and very inviting roots. In very Jonathan fashion, he never made a resolution that wasn't some kind of dickish move. But hey, what can you expect from someone who was born with silver privilege he didn't earn? The city they lived in took pride in its self-conceived ability to arrange and decorate with nature's resources. But their arrangements of shallow means could not make light of two strangely positioned evergreens amongst a row of deciduous ones. Two evergreen cedars, to be precise, right next to each other, surrounded by others who, for one reason or another, were just not like them. As the previous century had gone, these two were preparing not to hunker down in centered solitude, but to be left with each other's company. And guess what? For them both, this prospect was absolute torture. They had in fact loathed each other since day one, 104 years ago exactly, when whoever was planted them had rubbed the two seeds in their hand, and both, impaired by youth and hot-headedness, took this as foul play. Blind to their granger's hand, they both felt scrubbing and trusting, and both assumed, thus planting an invisible third seed of their own, one of hatred for an enemy who never was. They had never spoken of this, but they knew. Both unironically up in branches for the audacity of the other's rage. The two were lush and intricate, offering sturdy branches to adventurous kids looking to climb. Obviously, this was another point of contention between them. Each day, petty counting of how many less kids had climbed on the enemy, interchanging boasting and quiet smugness. Forget about extending an olive branch, these two didn't even know olives existed. As one of their usual quarrels were keeping them entertained, eyes were scaling them, assessing them. A group of bright yellow and orange beings called engineers, as well as some just orange handymen, were gathered on the sidewalk and, yep, definitely talking about them. Whispers of needing a small entry for bikes to go from Avenue to the park and across. And this kind of talk catches the attention of the witty one of the pair, who naively teases his neighbor about how they'll cut some of his branches because they were scrawnier than his own. Scorned but unflinching, the other goes for a quick comeback, but as usual, can come up with something clever fast. Let's just say he's not the witty one of the two. In fact, he'll be the first to tell you that he is more of a Zen kind of tree. And when Weedy would hear him in this self congratulatory talk, he would laugh and tease some more, and yep, Zen would lose some of his calm. That is what is happening in this very moment, as Weedy tickles him with his furthest twig. Oh, I thought after years of grounded meditation, you could just not be faced by us mortal cedars, huh, Zen? Feeling called out, Zen the tree composes himself by lifting his highest stems a bit. Life's common answer indeed. Their back and forth, mainly fought by Weedy, had gone long enough that evening was now setting in, and with the sunlight disappearing, the city was becoming a disco ball of lights. The engineers had long gone, but left behind their tools. The other trees in the row were resting finally after a whole day of the leafing preparations. And our duo, left alone in the first of many evenings to come, started the respiration process. Weedy would never confess this, but he had observed and adopted his neighbor's method. A great technique, hippie stuff taught in the park in the 60s, and that Zen had incorporated in his respiration routine. I guess some opposites don't attract, yet stick together. Chirps and whistles and honks, and boom! The next day is here. Zen and Witty's day had begun like it had for the past 104 years. A glance to one another, followed by many huffs and puffs. Neither cedar knowing that this morning's first would be the last. By midday, judging by how long they had started photosynthesis, the orange handymen from the day before were back. But instead of carrying the usual ratchet or two, they were holding a bright red chainsaw and a couple of ropes. What are we, in the 80s? A red chainsaw with bright orange? Really? Willie chuckles to Zen. But then he is immobile, not a single leaf to withering. A thought more horrifying than Christmas tree shopping pierces his not so wooden heart. He realizes all too quickly that this won't be a regular trimming. And while the thought of them coming for him is of course terrifying, what is even more so is them going for Willie. One moment, amongst centuries, to realize how lucky he had been to have had someone for so long, even if that someone was a pain in his backlog. But that moment is fleeting, as the orange soldier charged in their direction, straight, straight at them, until a prophetic steer to the right. In a march both of them knew would end with goodbye. After 104 years, Willie the tree tilts a branch towards his mate, and this time, not to tickle him. Zen won't look. He is horrified, fighting with every fiber of his being to uproot, to tumble over, to detach one of his branches and smash that awful red machine into tiny little pieces. Time slows. The city is bustling far away. The scents of roasted chestnuts and dog urine disappear. Both are entranced by one of their orange flamboyant green reapers, who, finishing his water, starts to recount a family tale. Many years ago, when my nonno got to the city, he had found a job in DPR. People like him were given the most menial task under the guise of lack of English. You know, the jobs nobody wanted to do in the cold and in the rain. So, on one of those wet days, he was instructed to plant trees on this avenue, right here. Our country's most famous trees were cedars, a symbol of resilience. So he kept the only two seeds of cedar given to him until he had found the perfect spot for them. Here, amongst deciduous trees, planting two evergreen would be his own little revenge against a system which outwardly welcomed him and privately scorned him. Two evergreen giants, tall and thriving, no matter the circumstance or the bitter cold, while all the others put up the white flags. Two seeds, my grandpa said, one for his immigrant self and the other for his mother, who he had to leave behind. The man looks at them, whispers, from my grandpa's pocket, before he turns on the chainsaw. The loud cutting had begun. Witty the tree was already tilting backwards, giving him for the first time a new view of his long-standing neighbor. Zen! Witty calls. I'm pretty sure you were the immigrant seed. He smirks at him one last time before falling, his trunk halved. The cutters clean up and dispose of his remains. The day will go on, and so will the years. Zen's branches look hollowed down even though he has more room than ever. A raising cry runs down along his trunk. No, I guess I'm the one left behind. A moment of silence for Witty. A moment of silence for Zen, who now has to live for however long evergreen trees or cedars live for without his best mate, even though he could have admitted that that was his best mate before he got cut in half, you know? But isn't that true for all of us? Shouldn't we sometimes put pride and ego aside and just admit, hey, bro, I love you? Because that's how you say it, bro, I love you, okay? I am not gonna have an interview with the character of the story this time, which the only one standing would be Zen. But Zen is in mourning, guys. So I hope that you are not like waiting for him to pop up in the studio. No, Zen, first of all, is in another city. I just, heard this story from a squirrel that traveled with his family from that city to my city. Okay, which by the way was the squirrel in the Lonely Broom story last Friday. It's the same squirrel. Squirrels apparently are like Irish folkmen. They move stories from continent to continent, keeping on the folklore. I appreciate it. Maybe that should be a story. The folklore squirrel. Anyway, see you next Friday. Bye.